Hey folks, it's Lee here. Today I have a super fast and extremely easy bookbinding tutorial for you. I'll be showing you how to do a pamphlet stitch on a hardback cover. Now, the pamphlet stitch, it's very versatile and forgiving stitch, so it's not limited to using just on hard covers. You can also use it on soft covered books as well. So if you wanted to make a leather wraparound book or a fabric book, you can use the stitch and the tutorial as a guide as well. The paper you see that I'm showing here is paper I have hand dyed myself. You notice the different variations in colours. This is down to the different quality of the paper that I was using. So from the cheapest 75-gram copier paper to the more expensive 120-gram coated paper. You'll see the darker paper here, which actually dyed the best. This was the cheap copier paper and ended up being my favourite. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm going through the paper that I want to select to use in the book. This is mulberry paper that I bought from The Works, which is a UK site, also in Northern Ireland. So I'm basically just going through and seeing what's going to be suitable for the book. You'll notice that I discarded the petal paper because the petals sit out on the paper, so you can't actually write on it. And then I'm using this music paper here and this brown cover for the spine. So I'm cutting it all down to A5 size. The sheets are actually A4, that's the UK size, and I'm cut in half down to A5. So in the US, I suppose that's your basic 8.5 by 11 sheet cut in half. So these sheets will be folded in half again to create the signatures of the book. So for all that information about signatures, I do have previous bookbinding tutorials, so that'll give you all the information that you need to know about signatures and different bits and bobs. The basics of bookbinding, I suppose. I'll put those links below for you. That's just to save on repetition. You know, I have a series of bookbinding tutorials on my channel where I explain how to make signatures and what tools to use, so I'll link everything below so I don't have to keep repeating everything in each book tutorial that I do. Now all the papers are cut. I'm going through the pile and selecting which papers will go into my book. During the tea dyeing process, some of the sheets took more of the battering than others. I actually scrunched some up and I kept some straight. So it surprised me that the cheapest paper, it took the colour the best. It also seemed to hold together much better than the more expensive paper. So I decided to go with 5 signatures in my book, and there's going to be 10 sheets in each signature. I personally don't recommend using any more than 10 sheets per signature, because any more than that the signatures become very bulky, and because you're essentially stacking the sheets on top of each other, the pages will start to sit unevenly along the edge of your book. So here I'm beginning to make the signatures. Now normally, in order to have your signature edges as level and crisp as possible, I'd take each individual sheet, as you see me doing at the start here, and crease each individual sheet, but because this is going to be a little rough and ready book, I just decided to take the signatures themselves and just fold them in half. It doesn't matter if the pages aren't exactly level with each other. So I just covered them in elastic bands. Normally I put them in a book press to cut down on the air between the pages, but this is again just a rough and ready book, so I don't need the signatures to be perfectly crisp and flat. So I'm just using the signature here to measure the size of my book cover. So the width is going to be the same as the signatures, but I'm just adding on about 1 centimetre to the height of the book, or the book covers. This is 2mm chipboard I'm using here. I'm also taking a note of the width of the spine, and I'm adding on about 1 centimetre to the width of the spine as well. So once the first front cover is cut out, I actually use it as a template for cutting out the back cover. So as I said, this is 2mm chipboard. It's very thick, perfect for book covers. You see, I'm just using the front cover there to use as a template, and I'm drawing around it and just cutting it out. So that's your front and back cover made, and now I just need to cut the spine piece, which is basically the width of your signatures, plus I added another centimetre on. That's just to give your pages room. Now it's time to mark out your sewing holes for the signatures on the spine piece. A pamphlet stitch only requires 3 stitch holes, so I mark a spot at the centre of my signature and on the spine piece. It's going to look like this when it's all done. So I'm marking the 3 holes on my signatures as well as on the spine piece. So I'm basically marking both those those 3 holes on each side of the spine and then drawing a line across. This will give me a guide to mark the 5 lines for each signature. So I'm basically marking the center piece here, and that's going to be for the 3rd signature, obviously, because it's the center. And then from the center piece I'm marking the other 2 holes on each side for each of the other signatures. Because each signature is being sewn to the spine piece, I need to make 3 sew holes for all 5 signatures. So there are the 5 lines of holes, and I'm just poking those through. So as I said, there's 5 signatures, so there's 5 lines of holes, and then each signature will have 3 sew holes. So I'm just poking those through with an awl and a piece of foam underneath it. And I'm making sure that the holes are big enough for my needle to fit through, because obviously you don't want to be struggling with that whenever you're sewing the signatures in. And you'll see that it all lines up with the marks on your signatures, so you now have to punch those holes, the 3 holes, into your signature. So you open them up in the middle and then just punch the holes through with an awl. So do this in all 5 signatures. So the holes in your signatures will correspond with the holes in the spine piece. So I just put those to the side for now, and I'm going to work on the cover. So this music paper was actually really big, so I decided to cut it down. I just need about a 1.5 inch border all the way around to make the covers. So I'm just trimming the excess paper off all the way around here, and that using the Tim Holtz ruler then creates the perfect border all the way around. So to glue the piece on, I just used good old cheap PVA white glue, brushed it onto the chipboard. You'll notice that I added the glue to the chipboard rather than the paper, because once thin paper like that gets the moisture from the glue it puckers. So always add it to your chipboard and make sure that every inch of the chipboard is covered with glue, because you don't want any spots, because that'll create air pockets. So I'm just using a brayer here just to make sure it's completely flat and there's no air bubbles. You can also use a bone folder here if you want. So just flip it over and miter the corners. Again, I show you how to miter corners in my previous tutorial, so I'll show you those. I'll put a link below. I'm just using the width of the ruler here to leave the wee bit in the corner. So just fold down your sides just to make sure that it's all going to fit over properly. And if you're starting to glue with the long edge first, do one long side and then spin it round and glue down the other long side just to make it even. You don't want to glue a long side, a short side, a long side, a short side, because it just doesn't look terribly uniform. So you'll see I'm doing both the long sides first, using the bone folder just to make sure that it's all glued down properly. And now I'll go and glue the short edges. And as I said, this is just cheap white PVA glue. I think it was 99p a bottle. So that's one cover done. And I'm just moving on to the next one now. So as I said, place your glue onto the chipboard, and if you put the glue in the middle and then brush out from the middle, it does a much more even finish. So again, I'm just using the brayer to make sure there are no air pockets, and I'm gluing down the flaps. The dirt in my hands, absolutely bogging. That paper is most definitely vintage. I had to give my hands a good clean before I went on to the next step. So this is where you're going to learn from my mistakes. As I say, do as I say, not as I do. Here you'll see that I'm cutting the papers out that will go on the inside of the front covers. Now that's okay to do, go ahead, you can cut those, but I wouldn't recommend gluing them down right now. I did actually glue them in straight away. It's not a big deal if you do glue them in first. You know, it's basically for aesthetics reasons that I prefer not to glue them first, but I make this mistake every single time. So as I said, you can cut these pieces out, but I wouldn't glue them at this stage, and I'll show you why later. But if you do, it's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. Mistakes do happen. So there's your front and back cover there, and now we're going to measure the spine piece of paper. Now this paper is vitally important for the structure of your book, as it's a piece of paper that's going to be holding your book together. So the spine paper attaches to the front and back cover as well as on your spine. So whatever paper you use, it needs to be strong enough, because it's going to be the working part of your book. It's going to be your spine piece, which attaches to your front and back cover. So here I'm just gluing on a wee piece of paper that's going to be on the inside of your spine. And just use the brayer here to make sure it's all glued down well. Cut off the excess, and then I'm going to poke through the sewing holes again. So this is the piece of paper that's going to be on the inside. You're probably not going to see this, but I just like to have it all uniform, make sure that it's covered well. And this is the spine piece. This is the bit that's going to go on the outside, that's going to attach to your front and back cover as well. So whenever you glue this piece down, you're again going to need to pick the holes back into it again, your sewing holes. So try not to use cheap flimsy paper for this, because this is going to be the working hinge of your spine, So I recommend using paper that's pretty good, either cardstock or a good strong paper, or you can even reinforce it with masking tape or Tyvek or whatever you want as well. So I'm just measuring. There's going to be a 2.5 centimeter overlap, or a 1 inch overlap, where the spine piece of paper will overlap onto the front and back cover, and that's going to hold them together. So I'm just measuring out 1 inch here to the front and back cover. So I'm just measuring everything up and gluing it down. So this is where I made my mistake of putting the inside covers on. So I'm just peeling those back. It's purely aesthetics, you know. I personally prefer to have the spine piece tucked under the covers, so that's why I've peeled it back again and I'm gluing in the spine piece. But as I said, it's not the end of the world. If you glue it on and you overlap it, it's fine. It's not a big deal. So just work your spine piece and put the creases in to your book. I'm just using the bone folder here just to burnish the edges. So I'm using linen thread. This is unwaxed. I recommend you get waxed linen thread, but you can wax it yourself. I'm just using a piece of beeswax here, but you can get it pre-waxed, which is great. And linen thread is very strong. You can also get waxed cotton thread. So we're starting from the outside of our book because I want to put beads on mine. So I'm starting from the middle. So you've got your 3 holes. There's 1, 2, and 3. So you start from your middle hole. And you can start anywhere. You can start in the middle of the book. You can start in the left side, the right side. I'm just starting here on the outside. And I'm going up through the middle. Sorry, it goes a wee bit blurry there. So pull your needle and thread up through the second hole and leave a tail. Now I'm leaving a tail of about 3 to 4 inches because I want to add beads to the outside. And take your first signature and you're going into the corresponding hole. So you've started off in the second hole, the middle hole, in your spine piece. So what you're going to do is open it up in the middle of your signature and go to the second hole, which is the middle hole of your signature, and from the outside of the spine pull your thread into the second hole and up through the middle of your signature. And pull it tight into the spine piece. Now at this point it doesn't matter whether you go to the top hole or the bottom hole. You can go either way. I'm just going to go in through the top hole, I think, here. So there's my tail at the back on the outside of my spine piece. So just make sure you still have your tail there whenever you're pulling the thread through. And it's gone through the middle hole of the spine into the middle hole of the signature. And I'm going through the top hole. It doesn't matter if you go through the top hole or the bottom hole, it doesn't matter either way. So I'll go through the top hole of the signature and then go through the corresponding top hole in the spine piece. If I can get the needle through. This is why it's important to make sure that your sewing holes are big enough, because you don't want to have to be messing about and trying to create a bigger hole for the needle. So again, top hole in the signature through the corresponding top hole of the spine piece. And why is that going blurry? So I'm just pulling that through, and you have to make sure that you pull the thread really taut because you want your signatures really tight in your book. You don't want them wiggling about. So at this point, have a wee hold onto your tail and pull the threads tight together. So at this point, we're not going to go into the second hole again. We're going to skip the second hole where the tail is coming out, and we're going to bring the needle straight down to the third hole, which is the bottom hole. So you're coming out the top, skip the next hole and go to your third hole. As I said, the pamphlet stitch is only 3 sewing holes, so this is such an easy stitch to do. So you're coming out through the bottom hole of the spine and you're going into the corresponding hole in the signature, which is the bottom hole in that signature. Pull your thread through, and again make sure it's nice and taut. You don't want loose signatures in your book or it'll wobble about the place. So I'm just giving it a good pull there to make sure it's tight. And you'll see it's tight against the spine piece, there's no space or gap. So your needle has come out through the bottom hole, so we're going to go into the middle hole again, and back out through the back of the spine piece, which will be the middle hole. So you'll see your tail is coming out through the centre hole in the back spine piece, as well as your needle and thread. And that's basically the pamphlet stitch. So what you want to do is pull all your threads. Sorry, I just got an email through there. So pull tightly on your threads. Now you want to make sure that your needle and thread and your tail piece are at either side of that line. So put one or the other on the other side, because we're going to do a double knot here. So I'm just pulling the tail to the other side. So there's a piece of thread on either side of the sewing line. And just tie it in a double knot. And that's basically that stitch. That's how you sew your signatures into your book, making sure it's nice and tight, there's no spaces or gaps. So I'm just doing a double knot here. As I said, I have other bookbinding tutorials, so I'll put the links below. And just cut off your excess thread. Now, as I said, I'm keeping a tail here. You can cut this short if you don't want a tail, but I'm having a tail on purpose because I want to add beads. You can also have the tails really long and have it as a wraparound closure if you want to use it as a closure for your book. So there's my first signature is in. Now I'm just going to show that pamphlet stitch once more in real time, and then it'll go into fast motion to get the rest of the signatures done. So I'm going into the next line, and again I'm starting from the outside and going into the middle sewing hole. And I'm pulling my needle and thread up through. Again leaving a 3 to 4 inch tail on the outside of the spine. If you want, you can actually start this pamphlet stitch from the inside, so you don't have any tails at all. So what you would do is you would put your signature in and start from the middle hole of your signature out. But that's for another tutorial if you want. So it's come out through the middle hole of the spine, and I'm just taking my next signature, open it up in the middle, and putting it through the middle hole of the signature, pulling the thread up through, and again making sure it's taut. And I'm going up through the top hole. Again, you can go through the bottom hole first if you wish, it doesn't matter. So go through the top hole and the corresponding hole in the spine, and pull that taut. Just making sure the threads are pulled tight. And I'm skipping the middle hole and going straight down to the bottom. If I can hold the book, that is. pulling that through and then going through the bottom corresponding hole of the signature. And once I do that, I go up into the middle hole again, just making sure everything's tight. You get sick of me saying make sure that your threads are taut, but it's so important because you want your signatures to be tight in the spine. You don't want any space because then they become quite loose in the book. So I'm going through the middle and out through the corresponding middle hole, out into the spine. So you have your tail in the middle and your needle and thread in the middle hole. And again, you want one thread on one side of the sewing line and the other thread on the other side so you can tie a knot. And just pulling the threads tight to make sure the signature is well in there. And tie a double knot. And that's basically your pamphlet stitch. So I'll probably fast forward through the last 3 signatures here. It's such an easy tutorial, and as I said, you can actually start from the inside of your book if you don't want to have any threads at all. If you want to have the threads on the inside, you can cut them quite short if you don't want any of these wee danglies that I have. But as I said, I'm going to be adding some beads to mine. But if you didn't want to have any threads hanging at all, you could actually put your signature into the book and start from the middle inside signature, so the middle hole in your signature, and pull your thread out and then go to the top hole, back in through the bottom hole and then into the middle again, and just tie your signature in the middle. If that made sense. Made sense in my head. So basically I'm going to fast forward now and just fly through these. So because I have 5 signatures, there's 5 lines. Pamphlet stitch has to be the easiest sewing stitch in bookbinding, and as I said at the start of the video, you can actually use this for soft cover books. So if you wanted to have a fabric book or a leather book, you could completely do that. You don't have to have a hardcover book. These sew beautifully into fabric and leather and textiles and anything you want at all. So you can have like a proper pamphlet like wraparound book with like a leather wrap if you want. In fact, you wouldn't have to use linen thread. If you had like a thin leather, you could use it as your stitch and then have your tails really long and use it as a wrap, as a closure wrap for your book. That would be beautiful. But I'm just basically showing you can take this pamphlet stitch and do whatever type of book you want. I just happen to do a hardcover on this one. But definitely you can do soft cover with this. It works beautiful with fabric and with leather. So there's the 3rd signature in now, and I'm moving to the next hole. As I said, you can start from either side. If you even want, you can start from the middle signature and work out. Makes no difference because it's such an easy stitch to do. It's not like the Coptic binding where you have to be very particular. The designs are endless with this. It's a great stitch to use. So that's your 4th one in now. And I'm just going to move on to the last signature. And that's basically the book done. I'm just going to, then I'll add beads to it and I'll decorate the front or whatever. So again, I'm going in through the middle signature, right through the corresponding hole in the signature. leaving my wee tail, going through the top, straight down to the bottom, and then going out through the middle hole again and just tying it off. I really like this book, it's lovely, and the signatures are actually quite close together. I don't like big gaps between my signatures, but of course you can space yours out as much as you want. If you want to have dimension in your book, like flowers and embellishments, you could move the spaces between each signature much further apart. So that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any queries or questions, put them in the comment section below, or you can PM me as well. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you give it a try. If you do, I would love to see yours. Thanks for watching, folks. Bye.